It's 4th of May 25, and I want to talk about, well, if you're thinking, because Australia just had an election yesterday, if you're thinking they seem to have a lot of elections, well, you're right, because they have them every 3 years, which I think is the ideal amount for a democracy. And I think they're way more democratic than the UK and the USA. And I wonder if it's because maybe Britain was the first one to have sort of elections that we understand. I mean, I know it came from Greece, Democrates, Democrates or whatever his name is, the concept. Maybe at that time they put their hand up or something, you know. But and in some places in America, I think they still do. Maybe Switzerland or whatever. But yeah, but Australia not being as old as America or Britain, I'm wondering if they came to it later, and this is why their electoral system, in my opinion, is way more democratic than UK and USA, which both aren't that democratic at all, really. I'd call them really archaic democratic. So let's explore why, in my opinion. Well, as I said, first of all, they vote every 3 years, and I think that's a bit right. I mean, I think the first past the post system, which really America and UK use, possibly the only two Western democracies that still use that, really. Yeah, if you're going to keep that, it needs to be every 3 years. And what's happened is a trend now is for every 5 years in the UK and 4 years for the US, which is a bit better. You know, I mean, David Cameron put it into writing, constitution or whatever. We've not got a constitution, but into law. Britain, we would have an election every 5 years. Um, Somebody changed that. I can't remember who it was. It was maybe Boris or Theresa May. I can't remember, but because remember Theresa May, we had two elections in 4 years, which I think is fantastic. We actually had three elections in 4 years, which I think is the way democracy should be. If you've got a party hamper, a representative thing, which I don't agree with anyway, but so, but say every 3 years, I mean, because I remember the last Australian thing, and it just seems not that long ago, whereas in Britain, we've got to wait till 2029, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think we'll have to wait that long because our current Prime Minister is so out of touch with the people, and he got an overwhelming majority with paper thin first past the post victories all over the country, and one of the lowest turnouts ever. So he doesn't really have a mandate, even though he's got overwhelming. He's got 2/3 of the MPs. But that just goes to show you how undemocratic the British system is, really. I mean, his point of view is he's going to keep going straight on. He says he's going to double down now. He says he gets it and he's going to double down, even though they just absolutely trounced in the council elections. So he doesn't seem to understand, really. And he's taking. I mean, if the things I'm going to show you, if a British Prime Minister said, this is what I'm going to implement for our electoral system, I think it would be the most radical Prime Minister ever, probably the greatest Prime Minister ever. But they're not going to do it because at the moment Labour and Tories still think, well, if it's not them, it's going to be us. And they like it that way. And it's for 5 years now. They've locked it into 5 years, really. Oh, that's what we're to expect. And I think that's undemocratic as you can get. I mean, to think you might only vote twice in 10 years, you know, that's absolutely scandalous. Some people say it's 3 times in 10 years, but say you miss that one, the first one by a day, then you have to wait 5 years to vote and another 5 years to vote. So that's unacceptable. It's got to be every 3 years if you're going to keep the archaic first past the post. So well done to Australia and that. In America it's every 4 years, that's slightly better. In Scotland, our Parliament had it for every 4 years, but I think it was SNP changed it to every 5 years, which again, is very undemocratic. From their point of view, I would be delighted to have every 5 years because it's almost a dictatorship, really. if you've got your majority uh, and you've got 5 years, it's almost dictatorship like. So I don't blame them for doing that because they're abusing the democracy really for power. But really, if you want to be really democratic, it's got to be every 3 years at least. Okay, on to the next thing. And in Australia, they've got two things. They've got the lower house, what do they call them, representatives? Upper house, they call it the Senate. I think it's like America. But they've got proportional representation there, and I think that's every country's got to do that. Proportional representation of some kind. So the lower house, I get a feeling this has got the most power, I'm not sure, but they've got preferential there, so you vote for it in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know. And then if they've not got 50%, they go into your second preference. So I agree with that in terms of parties and party hampers. I mean, I don't agree with it in general, but it's a lot fairer than first past the post. And people will say that's not fair because it means people might vote right and they end up getting left. But that's tough, really, because in Britain, for the last, I don't know, 60 years, maybe even more, 70 years, the country's voted left, but most of the time we've got a right party. Um, Now it's just changed for the first time in 70 years, really, with what's happened at the council elections recently. Now it's going to be the opposite. People are voting what Labour call the right. So, because we've got three big parties now. So, I don't really agree with it, but if you're going to do it, it's got to be preferential. People can pick, well, this is my favourite party. I don't agree with parties, by the way, but this is my favourite party. This is my second favourite, third favourite. Really, you've got to do it like that when you're electing, say, MPs. So, I think that's what they do there. And then for the upper, that's the regions of Australia, like Queensland and that. And the way they've done it there is single transferable vote, which I think is the same sort of idea, but I can't remember. But that's because in the pick, say, three out of for each region, and it's sort of preferential and balances itself out. I can't remember. We do it in Scotland. In Scotland, half our MPs are elected for the Holyrood for MSPs, I mean, are elected first past the post, which it's okay if it's half. Say, I still don't agree with it, but it's okay because they'll try to keep a connection with the regions. And then the constituencies. And then for regions, they do STV. And I agree with that. I mean, I prefer STV. That's how I think. But usually, the last time, because the one I was voting for had no chance, I just voted someone I thought might, from that side, might get higher. Or in fact, I just done a sort of protest vote on aisle one. But then for for the STV, I done who I really wanted, which was the same party, I think, actually. But in this case, I thought, well, they've maybe got a chance. Next time, I think they'll have a chance, good chance. This time they didn't, but yeah. So, voting systems. So, this is really good of Australia in terms of still using representatives method, where you're supposed to elect an MP who speaks on your behalf, although they don't really. They do what they want or what their party wants. So, yeah, that's a lot better than what we've got in Britain for the general election. Uh, in Scotland, we've got a half and half, which is not bad. And I'm guessing they don't have a House of Lords of anything, which is a lot of nonsense. That should be abolished completely, in my opinion. So, on to the next thing. And I think this is pretty important because Labour at the moment are telling people that they're a party of workers. They're constantly saying that. We hold a general election on a Thursday when people are working. Or so, yeah, it's got to be Saturday weekend voting. And in France, I think it's Saturday and Sunday. It's got to be as easy as possible to vote Personally, I think most people should be postal voting anyway, and in fact, it should be e-voting. So, but for the people that want to go somewhere to vote, it should be Saturday and Sunday voting for the workers, because traditionally Saturday and Sunday is our day off. Personally, I think we should be aiming for a 4-day week for traditional workers, for quality of life and that. But as it is, we've got a 5-day week, so traditionally. So Saturday and Sunday voting. In Australia, they have Saturday voting, so I totally agree with that again. Or I think they do. It might be Friday, but I think it's Saturday. So I totally agree with that. And here's my preferred choice is the Swiss system. And I could say you could even improve on that because it needs to be direct democracy where people vote on issues, single issues, not to vote for a representative who will then represent them in Parliament, even though they don't really. I mean, what MPs in Britain could do at the moment is they could say, well, here's the bill, I'm going to ask my constituents what way should I vote on this. Of course, they don't do that. They do what the Prime Minister tells them what to do, or the leader. Sometimes they get a free vote where they can vote with their conscience. I still don't agree with that because they're voting with their own conscience, they're not voting with their constituents' conscience. I think you need to get direct democracy, so we're voting on issues, not on for representatives, which is what they want because they like it. Because if you get a safe seat, you might be there. If you get elected when you're 18, you might still be the MP when you're 80, you know. But I think most of them are going to lose their seats now from the traditional parties anyway. But in Britain, Nigel has said that he wants proportional representation, so I'm totally in favour of that. I would say traditionally he was a hard set first past the post thing like Rupert is. But because the parties he's been involved with recently have done maybe get 14 million votes, UKIP I think got once at one time, and no seats, or 1 or 2 seats, or was it 4 million votes, I can't remember, but it was a lot. And I think that made him change his mind on that, you know. I find Nigel very old fashioned in a lot of things, not on one issue he's too soft, but on that lots of issues he's old fashioned. But I think he's changed his mind on proportional representation because he thinks first past the post are unfair. But now, after this council elections, it's working in his favour, and I'm wondering if now he's going to change his mind back to what his heart says, because he's old-fashioned, I think. I really hope not, but he said recently he wants proportional representation. On some things he wants referendums, big issues, so I totally agree with that. And he wants to change the House of Lords. I don't know if he means he wants to abolish it. I think it needs abolished. I'm not sure if we need anything in its place, you know, because the idea is that they're meant to be the wise people. It used to be the wise men, but it's not really that at all, really, is it? In fact, there's more people in there than in the Chinese Parliament, where they're just rubber stamps, basically. I think, yeah, because both sides are cramming it with lords and ladies, so that they'll vote their way, and the House of Lords won't get in their way. But it's just ridiculous. So, personally, I think we need direct democracy, regular referendums, plus e-voting. We should be e-voting now. We've all do our banking by app. Why can't we do e-voting? We should be able to change our mind up to the last second. And weekend voting. So that's my sort of thing. You should look at this as electoral system. But Australia's not that far off it. And Australia's big negative, it's illegal to not vote. So literally they have 100% turnout at every election. Because if you don't vote, it's illegal. And I don't know what you'll get, maybe a fine or something. I mean, in that sort of situation, people have to have the right to not vote. You know, it's absolutely stupid that you have to vote. So that is the one big downer of Australia. I don't know. I'm guessing you get a fine or something. You know, it's absolutely outrageous because it means that maybe the vulnerable or just if you forget, you end up with a fine. You know, that's just sort of absolutely madness. So that's what I've got to say about electoral systems. As I say, anyone who takes up my ideas would be hugely radical. I mean, our Labour Prime Minister at the moment thinks he's ultra radical, but what he means is he's going to be a dictator and he's going to do his dictatorial ways, even though he's not really got a mandate because it's an unfair system and he's got 2/3 of the MPs. I think that's unacceptable, you know. But so, because if you look at the two referendums, well, we've had 3 referendums recently in Britain. We had to change the voting system. Can't remember what it was to the additional member. I think in 2017 Theresa May would have trounced the other person. So that wasn't a very good system. I mean, David Cameron deliberately picked an unfair system so the Lib Dems would come into government with him. They said okay because they thought it would shift the Overton window, which is fair enough in my opinion. But at that time I voted yes, but only got about 20% of the vote, and probably a lot of voters who vote Nigel now were the ones who voted against it, you know, maybe even Nigel himself was against it, I can't remember. Because they're all old fashioned, you know, they really want dictatorship voting, you know, what we've got at the moment. Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from, really. But the Australian system is pretty good. You need to switch it Saturday and Sunday at least, you know. That's the minimum you could do, and even then you'd be a radical Prime Minister. Yeah, you know, that's, and it's got to be every 3 years if you're going to stay with first past post, or any system really, but if you get direct democracy, in a way it doesn't matter, because in Switzerland they have quarterly referendums, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, and that's all I've got to say about that. So I'm envious of Australia at the moment. Okay, and at least in USA they have that 2 year cycle. That sort of affects because of the Senate and House of Representatives. So really they're getting to vote every 2 years in a way. But yeah, so that's all I've got to say about that.